Thorne didn't lock her in a basement. The room he chose was a corner suite on the 14th floor. Cashmere blankets folded at the foot of the bed, a private bath with heated tile, and a window that looked out over Lake Michigan like a painting she had never been able to afford. There was a writing desk with a leather inlay. There was coffee in the morning, real coffee, the kind that came from somewhere with an altitude. Piper Aldred stood in the center of that room and listened to the lock engage, a clean, mechanical click from hardware that cost more than 3 months of her rent. And she didn't scream. She didn't throw herself at the door. She just stood there, still holding the manila folder she'd been carrying when Thorne's men had walked her, firmly, and without explanation, out of the elevator and down this hall. She'd been with Crestline Capital Group for 11 days. 11 days of routing invoices, reconciling outbound wire transfers, and telling herself that every accounting firm had complicated clients. She had told herself a lot of things. Then she'd opened the wrong folder. Not wrong as in misfiled. Wrong as in, she now knew exactly what moved through Crestline's Luxembourg shell companies, and she had the documentation, and Thorne had apparently decided that made her a variable he couldn't release into the world just yet. Piper walked to the window. Below, Chicago went about its evening in complete indifference. She pressed 2 fingers against the cold glass. Fine. She set the folder on the writing desk, pulled out the chair, and started writing down everything she already knew. The first 2 days, the only person who came was the housekeeper, a compact, grey-haired woman named Mrs. Farrow who delivered meals on covered trays and never once made eye contact. The food was real. That surprised Piper. Roasted salmon, actual vegetables. The salmon was good. She slept well, which surprised her more. On the 3rd night, she was sitting at the desk with a legal pad, reconstructing the Luxembourg authorization chains from memory when the lock disengaged. Thorne walked in. She had only seen him twice before, once across a conference table during her onboarding, once in the hallway the day his men had collected her. Both times he had occupied the room differently than other men did. Not louder, not larger necessarily, but denser, like there was more gravity in his immediate vicinity, and everyone around him had quietly adjusted their orbit without deciding to. He looked worse than he had either of those times. The suit was the same quality, dark wool, tailored to a body that had been built by some combination of discipline and old violence. But the man inside it was fraying at the edges. His eyes were carrying circles the color of old bruises. He held a glass of something amber that he hadn't drunk. He stopped inside the doorway, looked at her legal pad. "What are you doing?" he said. "Reconstructing your Luxembourg cash flows from memory." She didn't look up. "I have about 70%. Give me another day." The silence stretched. "You should be frightened," he said. "I was frightened on day 1. She finally looked at him. "Now I'm annoyed. You have a $9 million gap in your Q3 transfers and you don't lose $9 million by accident. Someone in your organization is pulling it. Given your paperwork structure, I don't think it's you." Thorne walked to the chair near the window and sat down heavily. "Who?" he said. "That's what I need the Bridgeton files to answer. I can see the outputs, but not the authorization chains. If someone's pulling from the top, the sign-off is buried there." He looked at her for a long moment, not the way men usually looked at her, assessing usefulness, deciding how much weight to assign her presence, actually processing what she'd said. "You ate dinner," he said. "The salmon was good." The corner of his mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile. He came back the next morning with a hard drive. They fell into something that had no clean name for it. Thorne would arrive at 8, sometimes before. He'd pull the second chair up to the writing desk, always slowly, always careful, as though the act of asking permission through proximity was one boundary he'd decided to keep. And they'd work. He had the authorization to open the encrypted files. She had the eyes to read what was actually inside them. The Bridgeton trail took 4 days. "It's your CFO," Piper said on the 4th afternoon. She turned the screen toward him. "Harcastle." Look at the timestamp pattern. He's been running duplicate invoice approvals through the Singapore node. Every time you had a large outbound transfer, he generated a shadow document with a half-point fee diverted to a numbered account in Liechtenstein. 9,300,000. 14 months. Thorne didn't move. He's been in this organization for 12 years, he said. I know. The math doesn't care. She paused. I'm sorry. That's the actual awful part of what I do. The numbers are always right and they're never kind about it. He turned his head slightly and looked at her, like the word awful was something he'd stopped expecting to hear, and didn't know what to do with now that it had arrived. Don't pity me, he said. I'm not. I testified against my father's business partner when I was 23. He'd been running a Ponzi scheme through a real estate fund, and my dad had been his best friend since before I was born. My father didn't speak to me for 2 years. She looked at the screen. I know what the math costs when it's someone you trusted. Thorne was quiet. After a moment, he reached over and set her coffee mug. Mrs. Farrow had started bringing a second one each morning without anyone asking. A few inches closer to her hand, a small thing. She noticed it anyway. He stopped coming on a Tuesday. Then Wednesday, then Thursday. Mrs. Farrow's movements changed, quicker. The guards Piper could see from the window had shifted their patrol patterns, weapons unslung, heads turning more. Something had broken in the machinery of this place, and she had no way to know what. She sat at the desk and did what she could. She worked through the subsidiary structures, found inefficiencies, patched holes no one had asked her to patch. Her hands needed to be doing something while the low-grade dread settled into her sternum. She wasn't afraid for herself. That was the part that unsettled her. It was past 2 a.m. when the door opened. She was already sitting up. Thorne didn't say anything. He didn't have to. She'd learned the sound of his footstep, the particular weight and cadence of it, 2 weeks ago. He crossed the threshold and she could see immediately that his right arm was pressed against his side and the shirt was dark in the wrong place for rain. Don't, he said before she could speak. I'm not saying anything. She was already on her feet. Walk toward the bathroom. Piper. You came here, she said. She crossed the room and put her shoulder under his good arm. Out of everywhere you could go. So walk. He walked. She got him to the edge of the bathtub. Found the first aid kit under the sink, tactical grade, fully stocked. The kind of kit that told you something about a man's expectations for his own continued existence. She snapped on gloves and turned to him. Shirt, she said. He looked at her. I grew up with a grandfather who was a fisherman, she said. I've seen scarred men before. Take it off. He did, slowly, jaw tight when the fabric pulled. She kept her expression neutral. The scars were the written record of a man who had spent decades living in side proximity to violence. Accumulated, specific, methodical. She filed the information away and focused on the new wound, a deep, clean cut along the left side of his ribs, a knife, stitchable if she was careful. This is going to hurt, she said. I know. She poured antiseptic. His whole body went rigid and his right hand found her hip. Not grabbing, just anchoring, one fixed point in the room, and she let him keep it there while she worked. Talk to me, she said, threading the needle. Tell me what happened. Hardcastle had a partner. Someone I brought in 6 months ago. I thought I was expanding. A pause. I was being positioned. Is Hardcastle handled? Yes. The partner? Not yet. She pushed the needle through. His breath hissed out between his teeth. Look at me, she said quietly. Don't look down. He lifted his eyes to hers. Up close, what she'd always read as coldness looked like something else entirely. It was control, continuous, exhausting, total. The kind that never gets a day off. Nobody could carry that indefinitely without it costing them everything. Keep looking at me, she said. I need 4 more. He kept looking. When she tied off the last knot, the tension went out of his hand on her hip. She dressed the wound, stepped back, and started cleaning up. He sat there on the edge of the bathtub, not moving. "The guard on this floor," he said finally. He wasn't looking at her, just at the tile. "I pulled him south. There's no one up here right now." A pause. "The elevator runs without a key after midnight. The lobby rotation has a gap." Piper went still. She looked at the bathroom doorway, the room beyond it, the faint outline of the hallway through the open door. She stood there for a moment that felt much longer than it was. Then she walked back to him, put her hand under his good arm, and pulled gently. "You need to be horizontal before you pass out," she said. "Come on." He didn't move immediately. "Why?" he said. "Because you need." "That's not what I'm asking." She knew it wasn't. "Because you walked through that door," she said. "Out of every room in this building and every person you could have gone to, you came here, and I don't leave things unfinished." She pulled slightly. "Thorne, come on." He came. He was asleep by 3, she wasn't. Piper sat at the desk with the hard drive connected and worked. By 6 in the morning she had the full identity of Hardcastle's partner, a man named Solis, recently promoted, with an offshore account structure that hadn't existed 36 months ago, and 3 active transfers in process that hadn't yet settled. She also had, through careful navigation of access privileges Thorne had never revoked, the contact for the senior man in his operation, D. Reeves, Operations. She made coffee. She looked at the lake going gold in the early light. Then she picked up the encrypted phone from the nightstand, the one Thorne had left there weeks ago for emergencies, and dialed. 2 rings. "This better be the boss," said a voice like gravel and sleep. "My name is Piper Aldred. I'm the forensic accountant. Thorne is recovering from a stab wound and is not available. I need you to listen to me carefully." A pause. Put colon. "Thorne," she said, "and I just explained why I can't. Mr. Reeves, I have the complete financial trail on the man who partnered with Hardcastle. I have his offshore account structure, his routing codes, and documentation placing him at 4 meetings with a competing operation in the last quarter. His name is Solis, and he has 3 transfers in transit right now that have not yet cleared." A longer pause. "What do you need?" Reeves said. "I need him pulled before those transfers settle. I need you to approach from a direction that does not involve coming to this building, because Thorne is not in a position to manage a scene, and I am not going to allow this floor to become one." "You're an accountant," Reeves said. "Yes, and I'm currently the only person with active access to the full financial infrastructure of this organization and the admin credentials to freeze it." She waited a beat. "So we can work together, or you can find out how fast I can make 6 offshore accounts inaccessible on a Friday morning." The silence on the line was careful. "Send me what you have," he said. She sent it. When Thorne woke, the sun was fully up and she was still at the desk. He took a moment. She could see him placing himself, remembering, and then he looked at her and his expression did something complicated that he didn't quite hide in time. "You stayed," he said. "You keep saying that like it should be a surprise. It is a surprise." "Solis is handled," she said. "Reeves has the documentation. The 3 pending transfers were flagged this morning. He won't be able to pull those funds. Mrs. Farrow is calling a physician for your wound. He's coming at 10, and you're going to let him treat you without making it difficult." Thorne pushed himself upright slowly, careful around the pain. He looked at her for a long time. "What do you want?" he said. "Real answer." "A real salary." She held his gaze. "Not what the temp agency was paying me, and full access to the organizational structure. If I'm going to close your financial holes, I need to see all of them." "You understand what that means," he said quietly. "I've understood what you are since day 4, she said. "The question is whether you want to keep running this operation with the financial infrastructure of someone who learned everything from YouTube, or whether you want someone who actually knows what they're doing." Thorne was quiet for a moment. "You could have walked out last night," he said. "Yes. You could go to the FBI today. You have enough." "I'm aware." She looked out at the lake. The city below was fully awake now, indifferent as ever. I've spent my entire career finding the holes other people made and fixing them for people who never once said thank you, she said. And this is the first time I've had total access to something genuinely complicated and genuinely broken, with no ceiling on what I can actually do. She looked back at him. I'm not pretending this is something it isn't. But I'm very good at this, Thorne, and you need someone who is. He was quiet for long enough that she started to turn back to the screen. Reeves goes through you, he said. Logistics, offshore reviews, the quarterly reconciliations, all of it. Yes. And we restructure Singapore entirely, clean. I'll have a framework ready by end of week. He looked at her. The thing that was usually cold in his expression, the perpetual management of distance, had been replaced by something rawer and harder to read, though she thought she recognized it. It was what exhaustion looked like when someone had finally, briefly, put down something very heavy. You're not afraid, he said. I told you. I stopped being afraid on day 1. She pulled up a new document. Rest until 10. The physician is coming whether you want him to or not, and if you're difficult about it, I'll freeze the Cayman routing codes until you behave. She paused. I have the credentials. Thorne made a sound that was, in some previous version of himself, probably a laugh. I know you do, he said. And the suite stopped feeling like a cage. It felt like the beginning of something neither of them had words for yet, which suited Piper fine. She'd always been better with numbers anyway. She had the rest of her life to figure out the rest.